accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of the podcast of OA. This is episode 124. I am your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I am joined by Phil Bova. Phil, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Myron. How about yourself, man?
Doing well. How's your summer been?
Summer's been, well, ever since I had surgery. I had surgery on the 5th, so I've been laid up for a while. I had surgery on my foot, so it's been a boring month, but I've been getting caught up on a lot of binge watching.
Watching anything in particular that's good?
Well, my wife got me involved in the Downton Abbey, so I've been working on that. I've just finished season 4 today. Other than that, I've been finishing up season 2 of 13 Reasons Why, and I did some other Netflix stuff. I started Frontier, which isn't bad. That's got Jason Momoa in there. I love that guy. Yeah, just some other stuff, crime stuff. I've been laid up, so I've been having to watch what I can.
It's been pretty hot and muggy here in central New York. Although today we had flash flood warnings, so it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it hasn't been too bad. I mean, usually it's been in the upper 90s, but it's been right around 90. It's just been warm. It's not too bad here.
Cool. Well, we have a packed show in store because we're recording this the Monday after Comic-Con, and boy, was there some interesting news coming out of Comic-Con that we need to talk about.
I was following my Twitter. I was following my Twitter the whole time I was sitting on my couch.
And there's today with the comic solicitations, and there's some news in there as well. So. Plus, we've got comics to talk about. We've got issue 48 of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, and we need to get back to Emerald Dawn Part 2, so we need to discuss that. And we've got 2 listener emails and a voicemail to talk about.
All right, great. Sounds like we're going to get a great show tonight.
Yep, yeah, I think so. So we'll take a quick break, and after the break, we'll start talking about what we heard coming out of San Diego.
Sounds great.
Hey guys, come check out Two Dimension Comics, the comic book podcast with no direction.
We feature candid roundtable discussions about all things comics, past and present, with a killer soundtrack.
We like to include visuals of everything we talk about on the show. You can find that by going to bunchofdorks.com and click on the Cyclops!
So, Phil, this last weekend was Nerdvana in San Diego with the annual San Diego Comic-Con, and there were some really good announcements in terms of Green Lantern, especially when it came to the DC finally releasing news about Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp on Green Lantern, and they called it, quotes, The Green Lantern. Whether that's going to actually have the word the in it or not, who knows. But some of the information that came out over the weekend was that Grant Morrison already has the first 12 issues plotted out, and Liam Sharp has said he's on it for at least 12 issues. And it's being described as a police procedural with an emphasis on an exploration of who Hal is as a person. And let's see, on top of that, there was something really interesting that came out of the DC panel. Bleeding Cool in their coverage had a statement in there that said that the Green Lantern book was meant to question the notion of a justice in a universe with only 2 human Green Lanterns, which obviously brings up the question, well, okay, Hal's obviously one of them. What's going on? Why are there only 2 Green Lanterns? Maybe that's a typo. I don't know. The other thing was that Dan Didio said that this series was designed to recenter the Green Lantern mythology around Hal Jordan. So there's a lot of interesting information there. And then you add to it today's comic solicitations from DC Comics with the news that Green Lanterns is canceled with issue 57. So, Phil, what do you make of all this?
Well, first of all, I'm sad that we're ending Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps to begin with at all. Then we'll get into the fact that I mean, Green Lanterns has been a strong book for a long time now, and they've really put a lot of work and effort into this book. But it seems to me, I've been thinking about this a lot this past couple of weeks it seems to me that there needs to be a shift with the Green Lantern and the Green Lantern Corps. And while I want everything to be around and everything to be, wonderful and happy in my own utopian vision of what I want from all these writers and these artists. I just feel like right now, I think it's a pivotal moment for DC, and probably I would even venture to guess Jeff Johns and what he's going to be doing with the character moving forward, because that's going to be integral to how it's going to be perceived by the general public if and when they produce a movie. So I think it's a good pivot point for him right at this time.
Yeah, it looks like they're kind of reassessing what they did with Rebirth. I think that, obviously Jessica Cruz has gotten a good chunk of fandom, I think, but I don't think Simon Baz caught on like people thought he was going to, and you kind of saw the sales dip and continue to slide there for a while. I think what's really interesting is that there's no mention anywhere of Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, or Simon Baz in any of this. I mean, that Hal's obviously going to be in the Green Lantern book, and they've said there aren't going to be any other Green Lanterns, Earth-link Green Lanterns in that book. We know that John Stewart is going to be part of Justice League, and he is a part of Justice League, and Jessica's a part of Justice League Odyssey. So where does it leave everyone else? And I worry for people who are fans of particular characters. As a Hal fan, I remember what it felt like to me during the days of Emerald Twilight, and I hate the idea that somebody's going to lose a character that's near and dear to them. At the same time, it seems like the franchise has shrunk and it can't support this many Earth-based Green Lanterns. And how do you deal with that economic reality and trying to serve the franchise well over the long term? And I think, like, as you said, I think we're at a turning point for this franchise. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I did see a video interview with Scott Snyder that talked about that his use of John Stewart and Grant Morrison's use of Hal, they've talked to each other about how it's going to kind of play out, and that they're in sync with each other. And if this whole thing that Bleeding Cool said about only 2 human Green Lanterns, you have to assume it's Hal and John just based on that and knowing what Warner Brothers' plans are for the Green Lantern Corps film, if that ever gets made. What does that mean for Jessica and Simon and Guy and Kyle? And, will they just be put on the shelf for a while? Will it just be that we're not talking about them? I don't know. I don't know how you can talk about the Green Lantern Corps and not include them. So, yeah, it's really an interesting time right now, and I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I know a lot of people are talking this evening on social media and on message boards about, maybe we'll see another Green Lantern Corps book launched with this Green Lantern series, and I don't think that's what DC has in mind. I think they...
No, I don't think so.
No, go ahead, Phil.
No, I don't think so either. I think if they're ending 2 titles within the next couple months, especially with the Hal Jordan title and then this one coming up, and keeping in mind with Jeff Johns' background, I mean he's got a lot of extensive background in his writing, and Liam Sharp, I mean his art's just beautiful. I just think that 12-issue run that they're going to do is going to do something to the Green Lantern universe that's going to pivot it into what Jeff Johns probably wants to do when he makes his movie. And I think, going back to what you said, your 2 prime characters are John Stewart and Hal Jordan. Now, I guess when you make a movie later on down the line, you can still have your other characters in there, like Jessica Cruz and Guy Gardner and whatnot, to be supporting characters. It just depends on what they're going to do with them in the comic books moving forward, because, like you had said, there's no mention of all 3 of these characters being involved in anything else down the line.
Yeah, I just don't think that DC's ready to make a second book. I think this is an opportunity with Grant Morrison to recenter the mythology, and then DC's going to figure out what happens from there. If the reception of the book is really good, maybe we'll see another book go. I think when you go back and look at Rebirth, I remember Ethan Van Sciver making a comment that the Green Lantern universe has shrunk, and the goal of Green Lanterns and Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps was to whet people's appetite for more books and to try to grow it again, and that just didn't happen for whatever reasons.
Well, also on another question, I don't know if you've gotten caught up, and I certainly haven't myself, with the Green Lantern's title. Have you read 50 and 51 yet? Because I haven't read those yet.
No, like you, I've decided that I don't want anything in those issues to spoil the dramatic tension that Robert Venditti's building up in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book. So I don't want to be inadvertently spoiled to what's going to happen. And maybe there are no major events that happen in the conclusion of that story. But if I read the Green Lantern's book and I see that the status quo is still the same, then any dramatic tension I have invested in that story is lost. So just for my own reading experience, I've chosen not to.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I've done the same thing, and there might be clues in there that are leading up to other events that's going to transit or pivot it into the just the Green Lantern book. I don't want to know them. I want to read them for myself when I learn that after everything is said and done. So.
Yeah, I'm planning on binge reading those issues after the conclusion of Rob's run.
Right. Me too.
So the other big story that came out of this was an IGN interview with Jeff Johns where he talked a little bit about the Green Lantern Corps movie, and he didn't really say a whole lot. Obviously on his website it says the movie's about Hal and John together. The main quote that came out of his interview with IGN was that the Green Lantern Corps movie is a complete reimagining just like he did in Green Lantern Rebirth in the comics, and he's going to be hopefully delivering a script that Warner Brothers loves and they want to make. It's going to celebrate the mythology and reinvent it in a different way. And that's to quote Jeff Johns. So the telling thing for me is everything we've heard so far is that this movie's on their film slate for 2020. I don't know how we get to a 2020 film if the script isn't finished yet. And Jeff Johns makes it sound like, well, hopefully they want to make it. That sounds like a non-committal to me. So I'm a little unnerved by it because I really want to see this movie made. And I think Jeff Johns could reimagine it. And I think if he looks at his Secret Origin arc, that would be a good way. That'd be a good structure to start with for this if you're going to do an origin story. And I honestly think that the superhero movie going public is past the point of having origin stories.
I would agree. And to counter a point that you're making, maybe it's going to go back to what I was originally saying with Jeff Johns and his how he sounds in that quote. I mean, it just sounds like maybe the Green Lantern that you and I are thinking of, and probably a lot of our listeners. I mean, we have nostalgia. We long for the good old days of when Green Lantern was written by such and such and drawn by such and such. But maybe with them reimagining and resetting this Green Lantern mythology, maybe that's going to attract, maybe they're at a moment where they want to attract new readers so they can build up to that movie that would eventually come in 2020.
Yeah, I hope so. I think one of the things that maybe it helped as well as hindered the 2011 movie was that you had all that buildup. Green Lantern was so popular at that time period that you couldn't help but think a movie was going to happen because there was so much hype around the Green Lantern universe. I mean, you look back at 2009 when the movie started going into pre-production, and that was the height of the Blackest Night hype.
Right. That's what got me back on board, man. I love that storyline. One of the best storylines. Still one of the best works.
So I'm not totally enthused by what Jeff Johns says. I'm excited for what I think he could do with the characters, but his comment about Warner Brothers saying hopefully they'll like it tells me that maybe 2020 is not the timeline we should be looking at.
I think a lot, and this is going to seg into another character who I adore and love, and that's Aquaman. But I think a lot is going to depend on how well Aquaman does, and then, probably after that, Shazam. And I mean, Wonder Woman's going to do amazing because the first film was wonderful. But I think a lot's going to depend on how Aquaman turns out. I think they're hedging a lot of it, the DC universe, mind you, on how that film's going to work, and maybe that will dictate what Jeff Johns and them are going to do moving forward with GLC.
Yeah, I was rather enthused in watching the Shazam trailer, the teaser, and the Aquaman trailer. I thought they both looked great. Different tones, obviously. Right. The Shazam movie, I think, will show, it's like I was talking to Bill earlier today because we worked together, and he was saying this is kind of like the Big of superhero movies.
Oh, really? That's a really, 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 really good way to put it. I didn't even think about it like that. That's funny. That's really good.
So I think there's a lot of potential, especially for crossover success, I think, with the general audience, because it is going to be so lighthearted.
He brings that different element and that different balance to it. Even when the animated features were, a lot of those when he acts out those, he's a bumbling kind of a kid. We've all been that age, and he brings that other side to the story, much like kind of Barry Allen does a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And the Aquaman film, just seeing Atlantis, I thought was really breathtaking to me, at least.
That's going to be. I can't wait for that to come out. It's just visually, it looked amazing.
I think I share a lot of concern a lot of fans had when they talked about Black Manta, is how you're going to make him look good on screen, and boy, did that answer any of those doubts.
Oh man, he looked really, really, really cool. It made me want to go out and buy that costume right now.
So the last news and notes type of a thing for this segment I wanted to talk about was, last episode we talked a little bit about Heroes in Crisis, and I talked about how I think Kyle Rayner, they've said that in the DC Nation magazine that Kyle Rayner is one of the characters who could either be the murderer, be killed, or be accused of murder. And I kind of posted what my thoughts were about this. I kind of threw some conjecture out there about that. And so we did a poll of our listeners and readers from the Podcast of OA, Blog of OA Facebook group. And I asked them, what did they think? And it was interesting. 36% of the people, we had about 100 people respond to this. 36% of the people thought that Kyle would be accused of murder. 26% thought that Kyle was going to be killed. 3% agreed with me and said that Kyle was going to be the murderer. And then 35% said that absolutely nothing was going to happen to Kyle in this story.
That's interesting. Huh.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Well, something's got to happen to Kyle. I mean, even in all eventuality, something's got to happen to him anyway, because he's not showing up in anything that solicits. So, I mean, logic would dictate that they're going to do something with the character. Either they're going to kill him off, or I don't know, maybe they're going to turn him all into Darkstars after the story arc, and they're all going to go off to another planet or something.
Yeah, you never know. That's entirely a possibility, that maybe coming out of the end of this, there's a chance that one of them or more of them might become Darkstars. Maybe they, this is all speculation on our part. We haven't read Green Lantern, so people who have read it are probably out there going, nope, that's not what happens. But
you know what? I'll interject my theory of what I think may play out with this whole thing.
Throw it out there, Phil. Go out there.
Okay, so let's say Kyle, and let's go with the hypothetical that Kyle gets killed. How I think that's going to happen, I don't know. What I thought would happen is Kyle would sacrifice himself, to the Darkstars or whatnot, and that would call up the threat in the end of the story arc or whatnot. Maybe he would become a controller. And then what I figured would happen with Guy Gardner he would turn his back on the ring, and when he would go and, maybe revisit and reset how he feels about his father, and that would be, they would show him going off with his father, walking off in the sunset, and then he's gone. Simon Baz, mind you, he's also been going through a lot of soul searching himself through this whole entire Green Lanterns run, and he hasn't really gotten a lot of his past out of the way, and maybe they'll do the same thing with his character as well. I mean, that's just my theory.
Yeah, I think everything's on the table, and I guess we'll find out in the course of the next few months what the intention is going to be. We didn't get any clear answers, obviously, out of San Diego Comic-Con, and I think we're just going to unfold organically on the pages of these books.
So they said it ends at Green Lantern 57, right?
Yep.
So that's right, because they do 2 issues a month.
Yep, it's going to end in October, so it's going to end right before the Grant Morrison book starts. Gotcha.
So, great. Got a long time to wait.
It's only November.
I know. You're right.
So why don't we'll wrap it up here, and we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we've got to start talking about The Last Charge Part 1 in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 48.
Awesome. Looking forward to that one.
This is Robert Vendetti, and you're listening to the Podcast of OA.
So to start out our comic book chat tonight, Phil, we're going to talk about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 48, which is the first part of the 3-part finale of Robert Venditti's run and the whole Last Charge story arc. So we've got Rafa Sandoval on for the duration in terms of art. What's your thought about this whole thing, this issue?
Strong. Really a strong issue. I really like how I really like how he's ending this. He's ending it with all these high notes. You know, he's really hitting all the marks when it comes to this whole Darkstar threat. Especially, you know, when we get to the end when we're talking about it when they bring back the controllers. It's really great. I love it.
Yeah, I thought it was a great issue. I liked how it started out with Tomar 2's kind of inner monologue, and you kind of really get more of his perspective, and I thought that was great. And then, you know, Rafa Sandoval is really known for these wild action pieces and frenetic energy and so on. And there's that really great set of panels. There's 4 panels there where they're trying to have a conversation. It's Jon Stewart and Orion and Zod and Kyle and Guy and Hal and Arkillo and Hector Hammond, and he's transitioning them from a birthday party to a baseball park to a beach scene and back to normal. And it's just hysterical visual imagery and some little gags there. I mean, the whole when they do the beach thing and you got Hal looking at like, what the heck's this? And Arkillo's trying to cover himself up. And it's just hysterically funny. And it was a nice interjection of humor.
That was great. I remember laughing out loud to it. And I like what Zod said at the bottom with that, I don't approve of you, Hammond.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, come on. How more comedic can you get with a Kryptonian like him saying that to somebody like Hector Hammond?
Yeah, and you can hear him just delivering this deadpan delivery, you know?
It was. That was really. I mean, and it's funny because I think I posted this on something. I think I might have posted it on Twitter or whatnot. And there was a lot of people that were talking about this particular page in the book. And I like the page right before it, right there, when they're all floating in space and when they all first generally meet up all together with Orion and everybody. I thought that was a really cool image because I like how Zod's standing right there on the left.
Yeah, oh yeah. I just thought it was very strong, both in terms of script and narrative and visuals. This to me was a near perfect issue as far as I was concerned.
And it's it's a good war too. You know, it's a really. It's not some of these wars that take place in a lot of these comic books. I don't know if you feel the same thing or whatnot. Some of them they often seem either one-sided or really frumpy. You know, but this one seemed like a good, solid, 2-sided war. It almost mirrored a lot like what was going on with the whole, the Dark Side War? What was that? Not Dark Side War. The New Gods.
Oh, yeah, Godhead,
that's what it was. It kind of felt a lot like that as terms of, as the wars go.
Yeah, I liked how the battle was on 2 fronts. You had action above Mogo as the Darkstars were taking it to them, and then you had Jon Stewart and his group of people doing their own mission into Controller's homeworld. And you have some, you know, fun team-ups. Obviously, Arkillo and Guy Gardner together. That's always fun. But then you have Hal and Hector Hammond in the unlikely roles of stealth agents trying to get in and disrupt the hive mind-like control that the Controllers have and trying to disrupt them.
Well, what did you think about the Guardians showing up too? You know, so I'm sure that everybody in the Green Lantern fandom would agree that the Guardians are nothing if not annoying at best. What I feel like though, when it comes to their characters in mind, I just often feel like nobody knows exactly what to do with them anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because they used to be, if you go back to the Silver Age and Bronze Age, they were very altruistic, but they were socially disconnected, you know, from an emotional perspective. So they lacked, I don't want to say humanity because that sounds rather specious of us, but they lacked the empathy and the sensibilities to understand the needs and wants of the common everyday person because they were so disconnected socially and emotionally from everyone. And that was what led to a lot of the stress and drama between Hal and the Guardians, was that the Guardians would make decisions from a very, you know, we always often use the phrase 1,000-mile view. Well, they're looking at it from 100-million-mile view, and they don't value necessarily the individual freedoms and the individual lives of people more so than the greater good. You know, that to them the greater good outweighs any good, on a microscopic scale, and so there's a devaluing of human life or of species life, of life in general, that comes into play, and it was up to the human Green Lanterns to kind of keep them in check. And over time, they've kind of become more villainous. We kind of saw that at the end of the Jeff Johns run, where after Blackest Night, the Guardians went from these beings that were trying to run the Green Lantern Corps, and hey, it's back again, to having ulterior motives and agendas and being very, very flawed, to the point at which they carried out actions that were completely counterproductive to the progression of those characters and completely counter to what we thought they were believing in. And I think that made it difficult. I think people have had problems writing them ever since.
Right. I agree. I agree with everything that you said. And I don't know. I kind of have just mixed feelings about what they're going to do with them guys moving forward. Even when how they used them in the film, they didn't even use them that well. I mean, I don't know. They just feel like they've never been a really, really, really good part of any kind of storyline, except as back figures that are just thrown in there because they're associated with the Green Lantern.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that's probably the one part of the mythology that's been damaged a little bit, and I don't want to fault anybody for it, but I think it just... I think that they're difficult characters to write over the long term, and I think, for all the good things that Jeff Johns did, I think that might be one area where maybe he didn't do as good of a job with the mythology as he could have. But, that's just a part of it. So my question to you is, on all of this action, John Stewart disappears. So what do you think John is doing while everybody else is taking care of these other issues on the Controller's homeworld?
I would venture to guess he's going to get help. I don't know from who or from whom.
Yeah, the only thing I could think about was that he's got that Kryptonian device. He knows how to build that device that disrupts their ability to transport themselves or teleport themselves, the Darkstars. So I kind of think he's trying to do something with that, but there's not any information to go on. I'm hoping that's what we find out in this week's issue.
Well, yeah, because the last panel that you see him on is when he said, "Let's go," or whatever it is. Or the "Let's cause some trouble."
Yeah, and then he's gone.
I wonder if he's gonna have something to do with the Phantom Zone projector.
Oh, maybe that'd be interesting.
I mean, the only Kryptonian you had there is Zod. I mean, he'd be your only connection to that universe. I don't know how he'd get his hands on it. I don't know if there's anything going on in the storyline that has to do with the Phantom projector, but I don't know. Yeah, Phantom could be plausible though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The other thing I want to point out about this issue is the relationship between Kilowog and Tomar 2. I thought it was neat how they played into the history of Tomar 2's family, and Kilowog looking at Tomar 2 from childhood now and being disappointed in him, and I thought that was really strong.
It was a good fight, and it was a good knockdown. But every Kilowog fight has always been amazing. I mean, every fight that he's been involved in has always been really, 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 really strong fight.
Yeah, and I was happy just to see Kilowog have something to do other than be background fodder.
Sure, exactly. I totally agree. And I like Orion. I've always liked Orion's character, and I like how they're utilizing him in this book. I've always had that cool. I've always liked that cool connection between the Green Lantern Corps and the New Gods. I always thought that was a really, really good connection between those two.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that's always been kind of strong and maybe not played out as well as it could have, but I think that it's neat to see it continue to grow. And I hope that's something that continues once the dust settles from all the relaunch.
You know what they didn't even, we're not going back to, and I hate to seg back into this, is the Comic-Con this weekend. Nobody mentioned anything about the New Gods movie or whatnot. There was no tidbit or no information came out.
Yeah, with the Warner Brothers panel, they didn't really do anything but talk about Wonder Woman, Shazam, and Aquaman. There really was nothing more for DC beyond that.
Okay. I just didn't want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Nope. I think the only things that have not come out online in terms of YouTube videos was they showed some footage from Wonder Woman, some early footage, because that movie's only, I think, 3 weeks to somewhere between 3 weeks and 3 months of filming. So they showed a little bit of test footage, I guess, that was very enthusiastically received, and I guess those in attendance got to see an extended Aquaman trailer that showed Aquaman in his iconic outfit.
Oh, that would be, man, I wish it, so I'm going to have to get on YouTube to check that out then, probably.
Well, they didn't leak that one. It looks like that was an exclusive for convention goers only.
Ah.
Yeah, boo, hiss, boo. So, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps is still running on all cylinders.
Yeah, Venditti's got it strong. He was there at Comic-Con this weekend, too, I heard.
Yeah, I heard he was there. But, so I know, I think he's doing really good on the Hawkman book, too. So, I'm really going to be ashamed to see him go.
Yeah, well, I'm not looking forward to the end of this. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, on a side note, with these books, I've been picking up all these all hard copies of these books because of the Tyler Kirkham variants, and so the next one is going to have the other side of that Guy Gardner Kilowog photo at the beginning.
Oh, good.
I'm sorry, no, the Guy Gardner Hal Jordan, and it's got Arkillo with his arm over the top. Next month comes out, it shows the other half, and it shows John Stewart and Kyle Rayner. Yeah,
that's neat. It's a neat piece of interlocking art.
Yeah, it's really cool when artists get to do that. So,
very much so. So let's take a quick break, and we've got another retro review. We're going to talk about Emerald Dawn 2.
Okay, great.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Phil, last episode we talked about Green Lantern Emerald Dawn as part of our retro review, and so it only makes sense to make this episode's content about Green Lantern Emerald Dawn 2. So, if you'd like to lead us in this expedition of going back to 1991, please jump right in and take it away.
All right, sounds great, Myron. So we got Emerald Dawn 2, issue number 1. And like Myron said, this is from 1991, written by Keith Giffen and Gerard Jones. I liked it. I really like going back and reading these older issues with a different kind of perspective that we got from some of the stuff that's coming up, that's been coming out as of late. But I thought it was kind of cool how he's in jail. Now he's in jail, obviously, from the first part. And he's going through his training. The only thing I didn't like is that he sneaks out of jail to do some of this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he does his time, but he doesn't really do his time, if that makes sense.
No, he doesn't. I mean, at all.
I do think one of the strengths of this story was there was a lot of emphasis on Sinestro, and this really fleshed out the relationship between Hal and Sinestro.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And it was also cool to see characters utilized in different ways, like Guy Gardner being his lawyer. I think it was at the lawyer in issue 1. Yeah,
it was his counselor while Hal's in jail, and Guy Gardner finds out Hal's secret identity, that he's Green Lantern, and at the end of the story you see him kind of freak out and lose his temper, so you kind of see flashes of where Guy Gardner is going to go. I thought it was a neat way to introduce the character, and it's also did a reintroduction of Kat Matui.
Right, exactly. And what'd you think about the relationship between Hal Jordan and Sinestro during this?
I thought it was played off really well. I thought it was done strong. I think, what Jeff Johns talked about during his run, he was going to do after Secret Origin, he was going to do a Sinestro Secret Origin, and we never got that. And this, to me, was probably the best retelling of how Sinestro's fall came about and building that relationship up between Hal and Sinestro. I thought it was very strong.
Right, I agree. I completely agree, and I really like how it fleshed out some of their. I don't know. To me, it got to be their differences. I mean, I don't know how to put it like this. They're differences, but they're a lot alike. I mean, they're the same. They're pretty much the same kind of character. I mean, if you look at really when we get down to it, as far as even how we look at them today, they're the same and essentially the same person. They're just on opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, they're like mirror images of each other. They're not opposites. They're reflections of each other.
Right, exactly. And that's a great way to put it. But all in all, I think I liked the first part of Emerald Dawn better than I liked the second part. Only because myself, while I am a big fan of Sinestro, I don't think they utilize Sinestro in ways that I don't know. I feel like he hasn't been used a lot lately. I feel like they fell off with that character too, right? So, but I've always also never really been a strong fan of Sinestro. I've always been a big fan of Black Hand. He's always been my big Green Lantern villain.
Yeah, I think in this one they tried to tell two different stories, and the jail story wasn't really all that compelling, and so to me that kind of dragged it down a little bit, you know.
Right.
One of the things I really liked in this story was the Fist of the Guardians.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was kind of cool.
So the Fist of the Guardians were kind of Manhunters 2.0. These were the android versions of Green Lanterns. Liken it to, for the modern readers, liken it to the Alpha Lanterns, only without human or alien living hosts. They were androids, but their outfits were very much like what Guy Gardner wears, with that double-breasted coat. And they were their enforcers, which I thought was neat. It was a shame they only lasted for the last half of this arc, or this event, and then they were never seen again.
You know, speaking of, you mentioned the Alpha Lanterns. Speaking of Alpha Lanterns, there was some of that stuff we were reading on the solicits that are coming out that Cyborg Superman's going to be coming in the fold with this Green Lantern title. You know, I wonder if by chance they're going to do something with the Alpha Lanterns and bring back Boudica.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. One thing I think that it's downplayed a lot in this Emerald Dawn 2 is the artwork of M.D. Bright. He's not an artist you see a whole lot about anymore, but I really liked some of the things he did. One of the things I always liked about M.D. Bright's artwork was when the Green Lantern characters flew, they had this green contrail behind them, and he never did everything in a straight line. It was always this angled flying patterns that I thought were really interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it looks good on the pages. You know what I mean? Especially when you see the constructs a lot. I mean, it kind of signifies who the character is, and it kind of sets him apart from what's going on in the background. Yeah.
And this was a good series overall, but yeah, I agree. I think the first one was a little stronger. And I think because the first one had a central story arc and everything was centered around that, and here they tried to divide and conquer, and one story was stronger than the other. So it didn't. Go ahead.
I will go back to what you said about Bright. I mean, his art's great. I love his artwork. I mean, he really does good with Hal Jordan, and like you had said with the green trails or whatnot, he even draws a really good Sinestro.
Yeah, I like his flat-headed Sinestro.
Right, he just left the military.
Yeah. And I liked what they did with Kat Matui in this story, how they kind of built her character up a little bit more. You know, she ends up being somebody on Korrigar who's almost a disciple of Sinestro's, but she eventually becomes somebody who testifies against him, and when the Korrigarian people rise up against Sinestro and Hal when they show up on Korrigar, I thought that was good. I thought it did a really good job of showing that side of the story.
I agree. You're right.
And you know, it's hard not to talk about Gerard Jones in this.
He's always been great with the Lantern character.
Yeah, he did the dialogue. This was basically scripted by Keith Giffen, and Gerard Jones did the dialogue. And despite what he's gone on to do in his real life, his writing in this book was pretty strong.
I agree, and I like the panels. I mean, he fits a lot inside the panels as far as how his narrative goes.
Yeah.
And it really flows great. I mean, but I like this time frame of comics, you know what I mean? I just sometimes when you go, and I've always talked about this with other people, when you go outside of the panels, which I always call it bleeding outside the gutter, sometimes it gets kind of complex when you see a lot going on pages. But his is simplistic, and I like how the panels flow like that.
Yeah, I think too, this was the era when, you know, the late 80s, early 90s was when the Bronze Age kind of started dropping a lot of the Silver Age goofiness. You know, there was still a lot of that in the early part of the Bronze Age, and by the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of that kind of fell away, and so that was when comics really started to evolve a little bit more in terms of having a little bit more complex storytelling.
Oh, that's a good. I didn't think about it like that. That's a valid point.
But it's definitely worth picking up and trade, despite the, you know, some people are like, I'm never going to read anything that Gerard Jones writes again, and I can't I think what he did was just deplorable, but at the same time, I'm not going to burn all my comics.
No, definitely not. And it's still a piece. It's still a piece of your comic book fandom. You know, it's still a piece of the Green Lantern mythology. I mean, don't be dismissive of it. There's a lot of writers out there and stuff that I may not agree with their views, or I may not agree with what they say. But you know, a lot of the comic book writing is still pretty good. So I just tend to read it for the enjoyment. And I try to keep a lot of that other jargon out of it.
Yep, same here. So let's take a quick break, and we've got voicemail and a couple of emails to read.
Okay, great. Sounds good, Myron. Hey guys, welcome back to another fantastic episode of our podcast. Myron, how's it going? Still great?
Still good.
All right, so we got some listener feedback. I understand you got a voicemail, you got a couple of emails. So let's listen to that first voicemail, the audio, and then this is Dan from Connecticut. Am I right?
That's correct.
All right, so let's listen to that and see what he has to say.
Hi guys, this is Dan from Connecticut. Just wanted to let you guys know your show is amazing. I've been a long-time listener. You're actually one of the first podcasts I officially subscribed to. As a result, you've even inspired me to kind of do my own podcast. It's called The Island, a comic, sci-fi, fantasy, pop culture podcast. But enough of that. I really want to just talk to you guys. First off, I never got to say goodbye to Bill. Bill, thank you again for being what I would call the everyman Green Lantern fan. Phil, welcome to the show. You have been amazing. I like you stepping in and really trying to get us to look back at some classic material. And always Myron, you are the guru. You are amazing, and you make this show what it is. And like I said, you have been personally a huge inspiration to me, and I can't thank you enough. Now, I do have to agree. I think the best place to start a Green Lantern fan would be Jeff Johns' Secret Origin. I think it's a little easier to jump in. You don't need to know lots of backstory. Now, I am a huge fan of Green Lantern Rebirth, but if you start it, you'll be confused as a new fan. All this stuff about the Spectre, references to Guy Gardner being the Warrior, and just a whole bunch of parallax stuff that you might not even recall from back in Zero Hour days. So definitely Secret Origins, I think, is an easier jumping on point. However, after that, I would go right back into Rebirth. And even if you had to then cheat a bit, go into Sinestro Core War just to get people excited. Keep up the great work as always. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And keep charging that ring. Bring it on.
So Dan, thanks a lot for that voicemail. I'm tickled that we inspired you to do something. To me, one of my goals in the blog and the podcast was not only to try to be a good ambassador, but inspire other people to creatively embrace their fandoms and do things on their own. And so to hear that we've kind of inspired you in some way to do your own podcast is great. In fact, what I'd like you to do, if you could send me a 15 to 20 second bumper about your podcast, I'd like to use it in between segments of this show so we can help promote your show. So, please do that. And I will certainly pass on to Bill your kind words, although I know he is listening to the show, even though he's not making the show anymore. And thank you for the warm welcome to Phil. So I think that, I love hearing from listeners. So thank you for taking the time out of your day. Phil, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's always flattering when you hear, people, praising you and being, admiring you for what you're doing just because you want to do it for these other fans and stuff. And I'll tell you what, sometimes your time just gets away and like Dan starting his podcast, he'll understand, I guess he probably understands that by now, that you get to talking about stuff, especially stuff that you're passionate about, and the Green Lantern Corps has always been something that I've been passionate about, much like you. Yeah, probably not near as much as you, but I mean, you get to talking and you just get this narrative going back and forth with other fans, and then you and I, and it's like, it's really, really fun. It just gives it like an hour and a couple hours of levity talking about something that you admire and you love. I appreciate it, Dan. I appreciate all the comments, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to be able to step away from the real world and find other people who love the same kind of things you do. There's a camaraderie there. And I think Dan's comments about Secret Origin are pretty spot on as well. I think that is a good spot. And, I wonder how much of Secret Origin is going to make it into Jeff Johns' script for the Green Lantern Corps movie.
I wouldn't be surprised if he had used some aspects of it. It seemed like there were some of the aspects of Aquaman's rebirth that were showing up in James Wan's trailer. It just seemed like there was a couple quirks that I saw in there that it just seemed like, yeah, I've seen that before in the Aquaman titles. And I went and flipped back through it, and like Rebirth was one of them. So I don't know, maybe they go back to that source material like that. It's reinvention of characters. So Jeff Johns would be good for it if he did, especially with that particular story arc.
Yeah, and Dan, I want you to know too. Sometimes when we do this kind of stuff, there's a lot of work involved in writing the blog and promoting the blog and recording the show and editing the show, and sometimes it's easy to, I don't want to say get discouraged, but you wonder whether people are really listening. So the fact that you took your time out of your day to let us know how much the show means to you is very energizing to me, and I'm sure it is to you, Phil.
I agree. Totally agree. I mean, because, we spend, I don't know, I've listened to other podcasts and stuff like that, and I've always been appreciative of the fact that somebody's out there on the other end, and they're taking time out of their life to share their stuff, their stories, their opinions, and I appreciate everybody's opinions, and I don't let any of the negativity get in the way of that, because I know there's a lot of negativity out here in the fandom, and, you see it all the time. There's a lot of stories that are coming out of, a lot on Twitter, where they get their sights set on some of these characters, like they're doing with the Starfire character that they're doing with the Titans movie. I hate hearing stuff like that because, everybody has their likes. That doesn't mean you have to hate on everybody else just because of theirs.
Yep, I agree. There's a certain toxicity that the internet creates, that people will say things they don't have the courage to say to someone's face because they can hide behind a keyboard, and that's always detrimental, I think, in the long run. Anyway, thanks again, Dan. And the next email we've got is from Marcos. So Marcos says, hello, my fellow Green Lantern Corps. In regards to that Kyle Rayner question, I think DC would be wise to sort of retcon this direction in terms of making him a murderer, much like what Marvel recently did with Captain America and Hail Hydra. Kyle's too much of a fan favorite. Anyway, love the podcast. You guys definitely make my workday more tolerable. Rock on. Marcos, thank you so much for that. Thanks for taking your time out of your day to drop us a note. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Kyle. Admittedly, I'm not a huge Kyle fan, but I know for a lot of people, Kyle is their Green Lantern. And I don't wish on a Kyle fan what I experienced in 1994 when Emerald Twilight came out. And I know when Green Lantern Rebirth was coming out, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth over, geez, are they going to kill Kyle off? And I don't want to see that happen. Will he become a murderer? I don't know. I kind of threw that conjecture out there because Tom King is writing the Heroes in Crisis event, and he wrote the Omega Men story, and he made a mention to me in an interview that I had with him that he was planting the seeds for a bomb that when it went off, it was going to cause ripples throughout the DC universe. And the fact that he's writing Heroes in Crisis made me think, hey, is he going back to the statement, and is this the payoff for whatever seeds he was planting? I don't know.
But all these writers, I mean, every single one of these guys, when they get together in their little rooms, and it just makes you want to be a fly on the wall when this all takes place. They got these threads and all these seeds set going forward and coming from the backwards, and they're probably this big diagram on a wall that shows every little nook and cranny that they got going on. It's just like, man, I wish I could get a picture of that,
Do you remember back when Dan Didio used to do that, when he used to take pictures of, like in the drawing board room, they'd have like a whiteboard, and they had all these comments about what was going on with different characters, and he would take a picture and they'd put it in the DC Comics, and it would tease you about all kinds of things?
I don't remember that. No, I certainly don't.
Yeah, that was really kind of cool because there was a lot of subtle teases about things.
They don't do that anymore because everybody complains about spoilers and stuff, and then everybody wants to be like it's got to be the cloak and dagger when it comes to situations like this. Can't give anything away. Yeah,
it's funny because we live in this day and age of the 24-hour news cycle, and people want the information, but then they don't want to be spoiled. And how do you wade those waters?
Right, you can't. I mean, there's no way. I mean, everybody's like you said, they want the immediacy of it. And you can't. I mean, you really can't. Not with this day and age of technology.
Yeah, and it's like you can't go on social media after a movie comes out because everybody spoiled the entire plot. And so then people cry about spoilers, but at the same time they want to hear from creators. So it's an interesting dynamic and an interesting world we live in. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll go on to our next email, and this is from Andrei Kuleshov. He's a Russian listener. Okay. So we got, hello, Myron and Phil. Really glad that you keep making the podcast. I've been a loyal listener for 4 years now, and it's good to see that you've been able to record more frequently with the new co-host. Your new segment in which you discuss older comics is very nice. I hope you will keep it. All right. Well, thanks, Andre. And we're going to keep it because I guess you'll have to give me an assignment tonight, Myron, for our next throwback, huh?
Well, I think I'm going to pick the next one.
Oh, you're going to do the next one. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Love it. So, Andre, so we're gonna do the next one, and Myron's gonna pick tonight. So hopefully he's got one in store for you.
Yep. And then Andre's got some more stuff in his email there too.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Here we go. My bad. You have recommended Rebirth and Emerald Dawn as a good starting points, and I want to recommend to start right after Crisis on Infinite Earths, when the main title was renamed as a Green Lantern Corps. Steve Englehart did a pretty good job on it. Hal, John, Guy, Katmantu, Kilowog, Arisia, Chip, Salak were all based on Earth, and Kilowog became Green Lantern in Russia for a brief period of time. It was pretty hilarious. Also, I thought it might be interesting for you to know that Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run is being published in Russia right now. They started with Secret Origin, proceeding with Green Lantern Rebirth, and soon there will be Green Lantern Corps Recharge and first arc of the main GL title. It's nice to see that over the years, the Green Lantern has become popular enough for this to happen. Looking forward to more of your great podcasts, and thank you for your time. Wow, that was really nice. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, it seems like I would think that their publication is after ours, correct?
Right. So he's just now getting to read the Jeff Johns stuff. So I'm kind of jealous, because I know what he's going to experience, and I'm excited for him as this unfolds. And he brings up a really good point that the Steve Englehart is probably one of the most underrated writers out there. His whole run on Green Lantern was really good. And he took, there was a time when DC Comics decided to kind of end the Corps as an intergalactic space entity, and they destroyed the central power battery, and there was only a few rings to go around, and they all came to Earth. And so you had this really weird dynamic where you had John and Kat Matui and Hal sharing an apartment together, and they were all basically stranded on Earth, all based on Earth, and Slack and Chip and Arisha and Kilowog and Kat Matui and John were in a romance until Star Sapphire killed her.
And so this was the one he's talking about, right after the Crisis on Infinite Earths?
Yep.
I'm going to have to go back and read that. I don't think I recall some of that. I'm really sorry, Andre. I didn't see the rest of your email. I was reading it, but I didn't scroll down far enough.
So I'm really excited about for Andre when he gets to this point of reading this stuff. I hope he gets to get all of the entire Jeff Johns run experience.
I think it's really interesting hearing from some of these viewers that are from overseas or from another continent, because I got a lot of people I talk to on Twitter that are in Latin America, and their publications, it runs on the same kind of cycle. It's off down there, so a lot of stuff that we get up here right away, they're a month behind, 2 months behind for some places. Now look at this, they're really far behind.
Well, and what I'm always tickled with something like Andre is that I come from a very small town, so my ability to interact with people from other parts of the world is pretty limited, other than what you can do on the internet. And so when you do something like this podcast, you start thinking, well, is anybody out there even listening? Is there someone out there? And I can tell by the downloads that people are listening to it. But then when you get emails like this from Andrei Kuleshov, and there for a while we were getting some emails from some guys in the United Kingdom, not in England, but I think it was in Wales or Scotland. And you start realizing the reach that you really end up having, that people will find the content, and people from all over the world and all the different walks of life. So it just kind of tickles me when somebody from another country takes the time out of their day to send us an encouraging email or ask a question. I don't know, for me it energizes me and makes me excited for what we do.
Absolutely. I'll second that. I mean, that was well put. And, I mean, and some of these regions are really remote, like Russia. I'm not sure. Did it specify what part of Russia he's from? I guess it really didn't say, or?
No, he didn't say. He didn't say.
Okay. So, I mean, it could be remote for all we know. And it is flattering when some people like this pop up from different regions of the planet, and to know that the Green Lantern Corps goes all over the planet. I love it. Makes perfect sense now.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for your voicemails and emails. We greatly appreciate it, and keep listening. Keep listening, because I think we've got a lot of good things coming up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
My name is John Mayo,
and I'm Bob Retall.
What is the Weekly Comics Spotlight?
Comics reviews from two fans with 65 years of combined comics reading experience,
who each get and read well over 100 different comics each month from Marvel, DC, and a wide variety of independent publishers.
Reviews that highlight books that may not hit everyone's radar screen, since most people don't buy so many different comics each month.
Reviews with honest opinions. We enjoy comics, but realize not every issue that we read is a solid gold masterpiece. All in about 30 minutes. So please check out the Weekly Comics Spotlight at www.comicbookpage.com/podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Well, here we are with another episode of our wonderful podcast that Myron was kind enough to help me co-host.
So we're glad you joined us again for another one. This has been episode number 124, and we should be back in a couple of weeks, probably talking about the end of the Robert Venditti era. I'm getting a little teary-eyed thinking about it.
Ugh, I'm getting sad. Also, Myron, you have your homework. So what are we retroing?
I don't have the exact issue numbers right in front of me. I can find out really quickly. I'm going to do a story that was written by Marv Wolfman. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back a ways, and let's see. Let me pull it up here and find it really quick.
I gotta find it.
It's going to be an issue that is it's a couple issue run. It's a issue where, let's see. It's going to be from the 1980s, and it's going to be Green Lantern number. Oh, where's the issue numbers? 132, 133.
132, 133. Will you do me a favor and text that to me? I don't have a pen on me that's handy to write
Absolutely.
that down.
Actually, 133, 134.
133, 134.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's a Joe Staton drawn issue, and it's written by Marv Wolfman. It was the start of the Marv Wolfman run. And to me, it was a very exciting Dr. Polaris story. It's still some of the Silver Age goofiness to it, but the underlying themes of the story, this was a couple of issues that impacted me on a very personal level. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Great. Looking forward to it, man.
Yep.
I'm glad this is your homework assignment.
Yeah. So it's going to be Green Lantern Volume 2, issues 133 through 135.
Awesome. Well, when you get a chance, text it to me.
Yep,
that
we'll
way I
do.
can remind myself to reread those, because it's been forever since I've read those, obviously.
All right. So without further ado, let's wrap this up and let everybody get back to their real world lives. So until next time, as always, please keep your rings charged, be good to each other, and make every day your brightest day.
All right, we'll see you guys.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.